our coordinator from Unitelma Sapienza, who will give you an overview and will welcome you in this conference. Gulsa, please.
Thank you, Valentina. And also from my side, thank you all very much for being here, joining us today. So we will share our main findings from our earlier series of conferences. First, I'll leave the floor quickly to our coordinator, Professor Morone, to welcome you, and then I'll provide a brief overview of the day and a very quick introduction of the project.
Thank you, Gulsa and Valentina, for opening this event. Yes, just a few words. It's great to see so many people attending this conference. I see that we are now 72 participants, which is really quite an achievement, I would say, showing the interest that this project is creating and how attracting around Europe. As you know, we are now entering the last year of our SUSTRACK project. And it's about time now to start harvesting the results that we've been gathering over the last 2 years. What we want to do with this webinar today is to initiate and launch this new phase of our project, where we translate into actionable knowledge what we've been researching on over the last 2 years. So basically, we want to translate into something that can be useful and valuable to all sorts of stakeholders, including, of course, policymakers, also with the aim of contributing as much as we can to the development of a European bioeconomy and also to the improvement of the European bioeconomy strategy. I will stop. There are some mic open, so please close them. I think I will stop here now, and I will leave the floor again to Gulsa, who will introduce you to the agenda of today's meeting, and then we have the opening of the two distinguished speakers. So please, Gulsa, thank you very much.
Thank you. So now I'll jump into my presentation in a second. I think you will be able to see it also in the presentation mode right now.
Yes.
All right, so let me just go to the first slide. So this is the overview of the day and also the project. So what we are aiming today is to present a summary of the main takeaways. So I see some familiar names that were already in our previous workshops, and during those 4 workshops, we reached a number of 175 stakeholders. We heard 20 case studies, and these helped us to map the most relevant challenges, to provide some good practices, and also we managed to collect some recommendations for policy actions, which you are going to hear in detail in a couple of minutes. And then we are going to present what we are doing under the SUSTRACK project, meaning that we are going to share our methodologies and tools that we are going to use to monitor the transition. And then we will introduce our system dynamic model, namely green economy model. And finally, we will highlight our preliminary contributions to the policymakers at the EU level, which are relevant to the bioeconomy related topics. And the expected outcomes are providing actionable knowledge in terms of inspirational good practices, challenges, barriers, and recommendations in 4 sectors of interest, namely construction, chemical, plastics, and textile. And we would like to collect your opinion on the tools and methodologies that we are working on in order to better shape them and fine-tune them according to the needs of industry representatives and also policymakers. And finally, we will provide our policy recommendations to inform the revision of the European bioeconomy strategy. And this is the welcoming session. Later on, we will hear from the DG RTD and CBE-JU about the policy-related actions happening at the European level. Then we will see the main takeaways from our sectors of interest. We will continue with the introduction of the monitoring tool, system dynamic model, and the policy-related activities happening under SUSTRACK project. And finally, we will conclude our webinar with the policy recommendations and closing remarks. And for the ones who are joining us for the first time, I would also like to give a very brief introduction of our project, as you might have heard about it before. So this is a coordination and support action. Now we are almost ending the second year, and we are aiming to support the identification of policy priorities and recommendations to design a sustainable track towards circular bio-based systems. We start with the importance of this transition in order to reconcile sustainable long-term growth with environmental protection. However, we are also aware that there is a need for a critical assessment of all these impacts, as well as the potential improvements associated with the circular systems. And in order to also transfer them into policy actions, actionable knowledge, we are aiming to be able to provide all these related policy recommendations to support the policymakers. And at this moment, I would also like to encourage you to visit our website and also social media channels, which we use very actively in order to communicate what we have been doing or upcoming events. So if you would like to keep in touch, I would really like to see you subscribe to our social media channels. And we have 2 main and 5 specific objectives under our project. The first one is to provide knowledge and tools. So this is more the technical side in order to monitor and assess the impacts. And of course, we also want to identify the priorities and to define actions to support policymakers. And strictly in line with these main objectives, we have 5 specific objectives. I just want to briefly mention about them. The first one is to identify, assess, and prioritize the limits, which was already done at the moment of this project. So we conducted a very comprehensive literature review. We used stakeholder inputs in order to identify what is hampering this transition. The second one is more on the monitoring and assessment framework, which you are going to hear in detail. And the third one is related to case studies in order to assess the impacts of the sustainable transition. This is where we conducted all these design conference series and we asked for your input. And then we have the modeling objective to create, simulate, and interpret a variety of scenarios for this transition. And finally, this is also going to be the last part of our webinar to identify policy priorities and define corresponding policy actions and provide recommendations. So for the time being, this is all from my side, and I will leave the floor back to Valentina again to hear from our invited speakers.
Thank you, Gulsa. We can move to the invited speakers. We are very proud and happy to have them on in this conference. So I kindly ask you to Rosalinda Scalia, Deputy Head of Bioeconomy and Food System Unit from the European Commission, DG Research and Innovation, to take the floor. So she will give a brief overview of the importance of monitoring the transition in light of the revision of the European Bioeconomy Strategy. So Rosalinda, thank you again very much for accepting our invitation. If you want to share your screen.
Hi, Valentina. Good morning, colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Unfortunately, I'm having troubles to connect with Zoom with my PC, so I cannot share the screen. And I was hoping that maybe you have my presentation and you can do it in my place. Sorry about that. But in the meantime, as you said, yes, I'm Rosalinda Scalia, Deputy Head of Unit in DG Research and Innovation, dealing with food systems and bioeconomy. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I know you've been in touch with other colleagues of mine in my same unit, or our colleagues that are responsible for the work with the CBE joint undertaking, and I'm very happy to see that Virginia will be following my presentation. And so we are all part of this bioeconomy community. And today, thank you, Valentina, for the presentation. Today, I will briefly tell you where we are in terms of policy activities, and I will present you a nice and useful, hopefully for you, to dashboard on that has been set up by the European Commission on indicators, on bioeconomy indicators, where you can find relevant information. This, yes, please, next slide. We start explaining something that maybe you are already familiar with, of course, but it's the EU understanding of the bioeconomy. This is where we stand, indicating that the bioeconomy for us is not a set of sectors, a fixed set of sectors. It is an approach to deploy solutions based on biological resources and biomass. And this approach will serve to better reconcile people, prosperity, and planet. So what you see on the screen is what we have in the current bioeconomy strategy that will be updated in the coming year. And there you can see that all sectors are associated services and investments that produce, use, process, distribute, or consume biological resources are included in this bioeconomy understanding of the EU. We have cross-sectoral policy framework that address 5 different objectives that you can see there. We want to ensure food and security and nutrition security. We want to reduce dependence on non-renewable and unsustainable resources. There's a need and the objective to mitigate and adapt to climate change, to strengthen European competitiveness and create jobs, and to manage natural resources sustainably. Those are the 5 objectives. And we want to put in place a strategic view on trade-offs, because there are trade-offs, and we have to take in mind the scarce biomass, and to have co-benefits also, for example, on biodiversity. So this is our framework. Please, next slide. And here I will tell you about where we come from and what lies ahead of us. I don't see still the next slide. It's the EU bioeconomy strategy timeline. Because as you might, everything started in 2012 when the first bioeconomy strategy was published. And then in 2018, we had the first update of the bioeconomy strategy, where there were key issues dealt with on substitution of harmful products, regional development, and understanding ecological limits. So the regional approach was put high in the was very prominent in the 2018 updated bioeconomy strategy. Then we had the presentation of the Green Deal in 2019, and you see there how all the activities under the Green Deal are relevant for the bioeconomy strategy. In 2022, we had, I wanted to mention an important political milestone, that is what we had in 2023, the Council conclusions, where basically all member states emphasized the central role of a sustainable and circular bioeconomy for climate, environment, to achieve the objectives of the sustainable goals and its strategies. So there we have a mandate. The Commission has the mandate to update the bioeconomy strategy. And this has been reflected also under the communication on biotechnology and biomanufacturing, building the future with nature, that I'm sure you learned about when it was published in March this year. And one of the actions under this communication is just to have an update of the bioeconomy strategy in 2025. So we as European Commission are already working toward that to meet that deadline. And we are carrying out activities with internally and externally with the relevant stakeholders. You will hear more about that. And this brings me to the next slide. Sorry, I wanted first to remind you that, to inform you that you will be consulted with a stakeholder consultation before, of course, the drafting and the adoption of the bioeconomy strategy. So you will receive timely information on the window when you will be able to provide your input for the update of the bioeconomy strategy. It will follow the normal legal framework and the rules that we have in place for the better regulation. So now let's go to see what is this EU bioeconomy monitoring system. I hope that you see the slide well, because I'm having some issues with the with my IT equipment, sorry about that. But this EU bioeconomy monitoring frameworks tracks political objectives. It reflects the vision and values in the bioeconomy strategy. So you have there some important and recent publications on the bioeconomy strategy. Our colleagues, this is what the Commission is doing, and in particular, the service of the Commission that is called Joint Research Center. Because to help achieve the bioeconomy strategy's objectives, we launched already in 2017 a bioeconomy monitoring system, which is part of the Knowledge Center for Bioeconomy. It is a specific action of the European Bioeconomy Strategy Action Plan, and it's our treasure, this Knowledge Center for Bioeconomy. You will see also with the next slides how much information you can retrieve from it and how updated it is for any activities that is relevant for the bioeconomy. So this system provides comprehensive, robust, and reliable information to monitor all areas of the bioeconomy. So there in this slide, you can see recent reports from this database, but then in the next one, I will show you how to use the database, yes, actively. It's an interactive dashboard, and this dashboard allows to track the bioeconomy's progress towards sustainability in the EU and inside the member states. This slide speaks particularly about the indicators, and this, you know, the establishment of indicators, it's vital for monitoring environmental sustainability and also socio-economic dimensions like employment and other critical issues where we have to take into account fair trade and trade flows. And this provides evidence-based recommendations for the formulation of policies. So this will be our base for the formulation of the update of the bioeconomy strategy. But this is also a tool that we show also to our trade partners. We have shown it recently to US. We will use it in any other interaction that we have when we speak at the global level with trade partners. And it's, as I said, it's of paramount importance for EU member states, for other stakeholders, and it has a very important regional dimension. You can really go into regional situations and extract relevant data and information. So you can click on each and every indicator there, and once you click, then you can extract the maps and data of the member state that you are interested in. Or you can even have the bioeconomy related with the SDGs. There is also a table where you can have a more global perspective. Sorry, I hear an echo that before I was not hearing. So next slide, please. Then I will go quick with the next slide because it's just to say you that this this bioeconomy monitoring system is based on 3 hierarchical levels. Of course, the first one is based on the objectives of the bioeconomy strategy that you see inside in the inner circle there, the 5 objectives. Then we have normative criteria that define how each objective can be achieved. And in the outermost part, you have key components that reflect more specific aspects within each criterion. But this is just for you to know how this bioeconomy monitoring system is structured and can be updated, of course. It's not a fixed situation. So next slide, where I extracted just one example on the bioeconomy monitoring dashboard, how from the previous page where you saw all the indicators, you can go deep into certain situations in certain member states, depending on what you select, how you filter. And yeah, you have this online dashboard where all the indicators and their trends are provided for a detailed real-time evaluation on the multiple aspects of sustainable bioeconomy. So the dashboards include related metadata, the known gaps and placeholders, and it can be really useful. I just provided you a second example in the next slide. This is the bioeconomy country dashboard with strategies and other policy initiatives dedicated to the bioeconomy. So you can see there at member state level which member states have a dedicated bioeconomy strategy, how comprehensive it is, and whether it's ongoing. So I am sharing there, of course, also the link, and you can get familiar by yourself with this amount of data. You can even download all the data with one single click and have a picture of where we are. So next slide will show you that the bioeconomy monitoring system also includes an assessment and communication component, which is a periodical evaluation and interpretation of the progress of the EU bioeconomy condensed into an assessment report. So if you want something more statical, you can download this report that was published early in this year, 2023, but it is going to be updated. So there you can also download all this relevant information and get this relevant information on the trends in the bioeconomy objectives. What is going well, what is not going well, so well as we would like to see. And of course, yes, it was highlighted that the EU is generally moving toward the objectives of the EU bioeconomy strategy, but environmental challenges persist. So the report is pointing to a need for policy coordination. And of course, I can confirm that there will be more policy coordination in the future, that we will be aligned with the new policy priorities of the next Commission, and the bioeconomy has an important role to play there, as you might have seen already in the different divisions of portfolios between the commissioners. So we are working on that, and we want to, of course, take stock of what has been done already, thanks to relevant and very important projects like your project, in order to pave the way for the new bioeconomy strategy update, and for new activities that will be financed with Horizon Europe, the remaining years of Horizon Europe that will be covering until 2027, and that we will use any other financing tool that we will have available in the future for your activities. So that was my my presentation. In the next one, you can just see how we are updating our activities, and we want to spread them thanks to communication channels. And of course, we are always available for our partners to provide more updated information, and we will come back to you to inform you about the stakeholder consultation that will be part of the bioeconomy strategy in the coming months. So thank you so much. I hope that it was clear. For any doubt that you have, please ask your questions. And if I'm not able to provide you replies, our colleagues in the JRC will be more than happy to do so. And it would be a pleasure to be in contact with you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rosalinda, for this great overview. You will hear also in the presentation from our experts in SUSTRACK that the monitoring framework from the JRC has been used as basis for our tool. So it's very, very interesting. And thanks for this great overview that will help also our presentation later on. And of course, we will be happy to participate as in the stakeholders consultation. We will give already at the end of this conference some indications for the revision, but of course we will happy to participate also in the consultations. Said that, I will introduce also Virginia Puzzolo here today, head of program at CBJU, because the research we are doing in SUSTRACK is also important to inform not only European Commission agendas and in general policy agendas, but also companies' agendas. So Virginia will give an overview about the public-private joint effort of monitoring the transition to circular bio-based economy. Virginia, thanks a lot for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Virginia Puzzolo. Before I start, tell me if the screen is fine for you, if you see the presentation screen very well. So I will give another angle of the presentation we had just before. So the policy are set at the level of the European Commission, but the Commission set tools to implement the policy. And so the joint undertaking I'm representing, the Circular Based Europe Joint Undertaking, is indeed one of the tools to make the bioeconomy real at European level. It's a public-private partnership. Why? Because you need to have on one side the public side, which is represented, is the European Union represented by the Commission, but at the same time you need to mobilize the sector that need to implement the change in the way we produce and we consume everything we need, in fact, especially with the focus of the chemicals and materials, which is the specific objective that has been set for our joint undertaking. So we speak about an envelope of 2 billion euro for a period of 10 years. We started in 21, end of 21, and we are part of the Horizon Europe of Research and Innovation program. So we last with the same time frame of these big. Well, okay. So what we do in concrete, and then I will explain you how do we monitor what are the objectives we have set, because today we are talking about monitoring. So we look at the monitoring of the policy objective. Now we look how do we monitor a program objective, and how the program, I would say the biggest program in bioeconomy that is currently funded by the European Union is the Circular Based Europe Joint Undertaking. So as we fund projects that have to deliver bio-based solution for material products made from waste and biomass in a way that is innovative, sustainable, and circular, the first things we did with the Commission and our private partner, that is the Bio-Based Industry Consortium, was to set what were our strategic research and innovation objective. They came from the objectives set in our Council regulation, that is the, let's say, the legislative document that defined what we exactly had to deliver in terms of innovation, in terms of market deployment, in terms of environmental performance, that are the three major objectives. They have been spelled out in 6 specific objectives and then in a number of specific priorities in our strategic research and innovation agenda. These represent what we want to do, but what we do to monitor that was to set specific key performance indicators. I don't want to overwhelm you, you will have access to the presentation, but in fact, I want to explain the logic of this, because sometimes for me, and that's an overarching message, we do not invest enough time to set a very good monitoring system. We are very good in setting very long-term impact and objective, but how we really ensure that we monitor and we really can deliver on what is set, I think is the main reason why we are here today. So this was a very challenging exercise. We defined 10 high-level key performance indicators that were spelled out in even more specific indicators with specific targets that are now monitored from our project. To do this, then we set a web tool to collect all the information from our project, and we report on that, today still in a bit static way, but we are moving also towards a dashboard approach, which will feed our annual activity report. You can then look and click and see all the detailed KPI that have been set and reported for the first year in 2023, because our first project started in 2022. So you see how much investment is needed, but without that, we will never be able to answer if what we are doing is going in the right direction, or if any corrective measure is needed, because we may be very ambitious in our objectives, but we have to remain very realistic. If we want to deliver in a time frame that is a 10 years time frame, something that can change really in terms of growth, in terms of job creation, in terms of opportunities, in terms of challenges that we are facing at environmental and climate level, then we have to really ensure that this monitoring system is in place. I also take a moment to give you the overview of how the portfolio is also evolving. We are not starting from scratch from 2021. We had the previous joint undertaking. Why? Because this is a sector that is emerging. The bio-based sector is a sector that, in fact, cover a huge number of actors in the value chain, and actors also that have not been working together. So it's not something that you reach with a short time action. So you need to plan indeed for a medium long-term action to give time to the sector to start to work together, from primary producers to brand owners and retailers, and at the same time to build up the capacity for transfer of technology from science to industry. And that's a specific objective you see in this slide, that among our participants, in fact, the bigger amount of participants are industrial players, but specifically SME. So even more a very fragile, very dynamic, but also very fragile part of our economy that needs support to scale up. And that's what we do, in fact. And I will give you just this short introduction for those that are not familiar with the framework program and what exactly the CBJU is doing. So we fund the project, Research and Innovation Action and Innovation Action in the context of the Horizon program. But specifically, the added value of IJU is that you bring together all the, let's say, not only the industry, but all the sector interest funded and supported by public money. And so to do this, you can reach very high TRL level. So we fund up to first of its kind biorefinery, which is something that is really needed to ensure that then we demonstrate that this is feasible at industrial scale, and then can go after the program is ended, the project is ended, to commercial scale. And I like to share this because this is a map that we are monitoring, because what we want to see is how we are spreading all over Europe and what are our capacity also of having competence and technology and potentiality for bioeconomy. This doesn't mean that this is an overview, the one that has been just presented before but from my colleague, give the overview of what is already taking place also at commercial level. We focus only on what we found. So it's still a partial view of what is existing in Europe, but it's where we think there is a gap. And you see that we have some action to do, for example, in the Eastern country, where there is a huge potentiality, but there is still not a capacity to respond to our call and to be part of this growing portfolio of activity. While we have clearly a very strong interest from the southern country, Italy and Spain, just to make two examples, that are really using this instrument to bring up the capacity, and we call especially at the demonstration level, which means out of the lab, but in a demonstration pilot plan. That is the step before the flagship. And then another important thing is in the monitoring of the portfolio, in the way we are choosing what we fund and what we have, where we have to reinforce. I make two slides to also give you a little bit the logic, because we have to program, we have to take decision. Where are we going to invest? And I make the example of the aquatic biomass in the terms of the feedstock and the bio-based and the organic fraction of municipal solid waste. These were, for example, two feedstock that were not directly addressed at the beginning of the partnership in the bio-based industry, in the previous BBI-JU joint undertaking. And there was a gap, because of course we have a huge potentiality in the agri sector, we have a huge potentiality on the forest sector, just for a matter of availability of resources. But we have other feedstock that we have to use in the best possible way, and clearly algae, but as well residues and waste from fishery and aquaculture needed to be boosted. So you need specific actions to ensure that you balance your overarching objective then with something concrete. The same was for the organic fraction of municipal solid waste. If we look at the cascading principle, what we want to ensure is that these residues that come from our consumption can be also used in that principle, not only to create bioenergy or biogases, but maybe also to produce bioplastic or other type of materials. And there was a need of a specific action to boost that part of the potentiality. And I will conclude, and maybe a bridge to the next part of your workshop. Of course, what we do also is to look at the applications, because we know very well that while food, feed, and cosmetic application are a sector that is already very active, we have currently probably the largest portfolio among our projects. There are other sectors that instead need to have more targeted actions because they don't come as natural as, or they have certain barrier or difficulties to overcome. So that's why we look and we monitor also the evolution of the performance going from B2B, business to business, because some of our projects address multiple, in fact, they go for intermediates, and then these intermediates could be used in different areas of application. But others, they go more to business to consumer, B2C, and they really look at specific application areas, which can be construction, can be textile, can be crop protection and fertilization. So you see the importance also of monitoring to ensure that certain sectors that may be very strategic, but may not be the first application area that could create opportunities for different reasons for the market, as it is structured for the other competitors, etc. Make the example of the textile, for example, bio-based material could have a big role to play. If we do not have specific action, we will not have project dealing with that. So that's why it is so important not to set only the objective, but to ensure that these are monitored and that actions are implemented over the way. And I stop here with my last slides, informing on how you can find information on all our activity, future calls, anything that is happening in the CBEJU. And I hope this introduction helped to set the scene for the next one. And I really thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Virginia. Thanks to you for accepting our invitation. It was a perfect bridge for the next session, because we are going to share, as you said, the barriers in specific sectors to be overcome, together with some good practices and examples to overcome these barriers. So thank you very much again. And with this, I want to introduce the next speaker of today. So we are now reporting the main outcomes from the previous workshops in the four sectors SUSTRACK is working on, so chemical, construction, textile, and plastics. We will start with the chemical sector, and I kindly ask to Laura Garcia from DBFZ to share the screen and take the floor. We see perfectly the screen, Laura.
Thank you, Valentina. And thank you, everybody, for being here. As Valentina already introduced me, my name is Laura Garcia from the German Biomass Research Center in Germany. And I'm going to present on one side a short overview about the value chains that we have selected as case studies in SUSTRACK project, as well as the results from our previous sectoral workshop. Basically, challenges that we collected, as well as good practices or recommendations that were collected with the stakeholders. So jumping in, our first value chain is on the municipal solid waste to methanol or biomethanol. The biomethanol is a drop-in chemical, which means it's chemically identical to fossil-based methanol. And by creating a value chain that is based on waste streams, there are significant reductions of the greenhouse gas emissions in this value chain. Usually, the value chain contains the following elements. So, as mentioned before, the municipal solid waste is the feedstock, and this goes to a pretreatment. A feedstock gasification takes place, and then a syngas cleaning and conditioning is applied to result in the waste-based methanol. Depending on the product, further process can be applied because biomethanol is quite versatile chemical, and this can result in introduction of products in different industrial sectors such as textile, adhesive, paints, pharmaceuticals, or car parts as well. Then on our second value chain, we have the bio-based monoethylene glycol case. The feedstock here is lignocellulosic feedstock or other sugar-rich biomass. This also is a drop-in chemical which shows the same properties as current fossil-based glycols, and also value chain generally follows these elements. As mentioned, the feedstock type is lignocellulosic residues that can come from agriculture residues, but also forestry residues, and woody industrial residues such as those coming from sawmill. They undergo a pretreatment. Here, two main processes can take place, enzymatic pretreatment, or also solvent-based treatment, like the organosolv. This allows for the glucose or cellulose extraction and the separation from the lignin. And then 2 paths can be taken here. One is the fermentation to generate ethanol that then will be translated into ethylene and finally into ethylene glycol. Or the second path that can be taken is the catalytic hydrogenation, which will result in mainly biomonoethylene glycol, but as side products, biomonopropylene glycol and lignin as well. Then the biomonoethylene glycol, as is the main product that we want to depict in this value chain, can be utilized also in different sectors, either in the polyethylene sectors for PET resins, textile sector with polyester fibers, packaging, or automotive. And now I would like to go over the summary of the main challenges as well as good practices that we collected. These were collected in different dimensions, starting with the policy dimension. As you see, we have divided some that are related to the whole sector and those that are related to the specific value chains. On the whole sector, and I'm not going to mention all of them, but just to give you an idea, there were several mentions of regulatory support or need for harmonization and also need for international collaboration for regulatory alignment. There were also mentioned for both of the value chains about focusing on policies on their carbonization, and here the challenge is the adequate carbon accounting, and also very important, this support for upscaling, which relates to capital, other type of costs, and competitiveness with the fossil-based incumbents. A couple of the good practices or recommendations that we receive from different stakeholders that took part in that session. And I also want to mention here, it's not one-to-one. Of course, ensuring policy coherence, but also very important, creating an enabling environment for investment security and to de-risk the investments in this type of cutting-edge technologies. Then also penalization of virgin fossil inputs was one of the suggestions. Implement transparent carbon tracking along the value chain and foster sustainable carbon cycles. When we look at the methanol from waste in the policy dimension, 2 main topics are different from those already mentioned in the whole sector. Is the current incentivized use of methanol for energy applications, which means that it is necessary also to incentivize the chemical application of methanol. And on the other side, the lack of incentive or benefits from the utilization of waste, which can be solved by increasing this acknowledgement of the value of recycled carbon, going towards a circular cycles in the bioeconomy. On the biomech, challenges were related mainly to the recycling of those products utilized in the biomech, and here there was reinforced the topic of harmonization of policy framework, in particular for bio-based, biodegradable, and compostable plastics, as well as to enforce certain regulations that are already in place, such as the packaging and packaging waste regulation, and also the chemical strategy for sustainables towards a toxic-free environment. I'm gonna continue with the sustainability dimension. Here, again, just mentioning a couple of the points. Of course, there's a concern about the feedstock availability towards 2050, and this debate between the utilization of biomass, either for fuels or for bio-based products. Difficulty in upskilling workers and keeping with the demands of the new technologies and new processes that are being developed currently in the sector. Also, lack of common sustainability criteria was part of the challenges collected, and this in particular for the specialty bio-based chemicals. lack of data and knowledge also about sustainability assessment and proper LCA systems that would allow us to really account for or identify the environmental and social risk of the value chains. As possible good practices on one side related to this feedstock availability is to identify these levers and this prioritization. How do we prioritize biomass either for one or the other use? No, there's an important development here that has to take place in the next years. Also introduce education to foster awareness about benefits of sustainable bioeconomy in comparison to the risk of the fossil bioeconomy. And very important, the harmonization to evaluate the value chains of the bio-based chemical sector. On the methanol from waste value chain, two main topics highlight as challenges. On one side, the accumulation of waste, and on the other side, the reliance on virgin feedstock. And here is also very important, and therefore here highlighted, the harmonized methodology for the environmental benefits assessment. In the biomech value chain, we have on the challenges, the health and safety associated with the production of these chemicals. And here it is important to have more data and more information about what are the additives and what are really the components that are utilized for the production of the bio-based mech, and what are the quantities, no, in order to be able to do a real follow-up along the value chain and the final risks that are associated for the workers in this production. And finally, sustainable sourcing of feedstocks and residual streams from agriculture were mentioned, as well as challenges. And here, for the sustainable sourcing of feedstocks, one possibility would be to establish regional supply value chains, and within these value chains to identify that feedstocks are certified as sustainable, or that that there's a follow-up of the feedstocks along the value chain. And finally, for the market dimension, we collected a myriad of challenges, and I think it reflects a lot the current situation. And on the good practices, we are a little poor, let's say it. But I would say it is more of an opportunity to keep working on these possibilities and solutions to tackle the challenges. And now, just to mention a couple of them, because we have several. On one side is this long-term investment or agreements, and this goes hand to hand with what it was mentioned before about the security of the sector. There's difficulty to access financing for high-risk technologies, securing capex, and also securing this support for first-of-kind plans, and not only for the first phases, but really that takes them through the whole process. Cost competitiveness with conventional products while reaching net zero goal, which is the ultimate goal of the sector. And also, just to mention one more, the fluctuations in the raw materials that apply in particular to the biomech value chain. As good practices, we collected that day some, and I find them very important, is on one side to voice a clear statement of the problems and the needs that needs to be solved in the sector. Also, to collaborate with sustainable finance sector to create market incentives and to de-risk these type of projects, and the creation of an after-use economy that really values the utilization of waste streams. So that is from the from the chemical sector, and I thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Laura, for the presentation. Now I want to introduce Toby Allets from University of Ghent for the construction sector. And in the meantime, I take this opportunity to remind that you will receive all the slides so you can deepen on yourself the different challenges and examples of good practices. So we are giving just a quick overview, but you can deepen on your by yourself if you will too. So we will send all the package to all participants. So Toby, the floor is yours. We see the presentation perfect.
All right, yes, good morning, and I will give you a quick overview of the results of the construction sector workshop from which was part of the design conference. So maybe also quickly starting, giving a quick overview of the 3 selected case studies for within the construction sector. The first one is cross-laminated timber. So cross-laminated timber, or in short CLT, is a pre-manufactured wood panel that can be used for floor, walls, and roof elements, and functions as an alternative for concrete and steel in construction. Some key positives are its improved sustainability, its lower weight, and very fast construction speed because of its level of pre-manufacturing. Then a quick overview of the value chain. We start with wood, which then gets sawn into timber and which gets processed further. Then for the actual manufacturing of the CLT, the timber is then made to the specifications needed for each panel. The layers are stacked, added with glue and pressed, and then resulting in a final panel which can be made to spec and to dimensions. And then from the factory, it leads to the construction site where it can be installed. And at the end of life, it can be either reused, that's one positive about CLT, or recycled. Then the second case study is biochar in concrete. So biochar is one of the byproducts, or one of the main products that's obtained from the pyrolysis of biomass. And biochar can be used as a supplementary material or filler in concrete. So the value chain, we start with biomass, for example, from agricultural forest waste. Through pyrolysis, we end up with biochar, which then can be mixed in with concrete, and then can be, which then the concrete, of course, can be either, once again, be a pre-manufactured element, or on a construction site where we end up with a concrete composite. Then our third and final case study is hemp insulation. So hemp insulation, or hemp wool insulation, is a bio-based alternative to the traditional insulation materials such as fiberglass, rock wool, PU, birch, and all other insulation materials that we currently use. It offers the same thermal and acoustic performance as these fossil-based or traditional insulation materials, but it has that added value of being able to regulate moisture because of its bio-based nature. So for the value chain itself, we start with hemp stalks or hemp plants. Then this gets processed to separate the fibers and the woody core of the hemp. So we end up with fibers and hurts or shives, which is the woody part. And then for the wool, the hemp wool manufacturing, the fibers go through a matting process, are then cut and made to shape and to desired specifications, and then can be installed on a construction site. And at the end of life, they can be recycled, and potentially, depending on the fully bio-basedness of the material, can be even be decomposited. So then some of the main results, let's start with the policy dimensions. So for the whole sector, something that I believe pretty much in all of the different case studies came up is the lack of a regulatory framework specifically for bio-based products, as well as that the current regulations and standards are also not really designed for bio-based products in mind, but more for the traditional and geo-based materials, as well as that our current building norms and standards are also not always advantages, or are often not very positive or fully as positive as it could be for bio-based construction materials. And something very specific for example, CLT, is that current fire safety regulations do limit what we can do with timber-based construction. And for example, for hemp, is that there's also some regulatory uncertainties and restrictions related to the production of hemp, which sometimes, of course, also are not necessarily related to industrial hemp, but more the non-traditional or the non-industrial use of hemp. Then some of the good examples for the whole sector, we need to really revise and update our building codes and standards to really start being able to include more and promote bio-based materials, as well as a more clear and guidelines from our governments and policymakers that really help with the promotion of bio-based materials, as well as the assessing of carbon, embodied carbon in materials. And something that was also mentioned is that it still is very important that we keep collaborating among different stakeholders, either in projects such as SUSTRACK, but also between the development of new products as well as new policies. For biochar, another good practice that could help would be a shift from recipe-based standards to performance-based standards. Then for the sustainability dimensions, both environmental and social, for the whole sector, some of the challenges that were brought up is that there still is a lack of expertise when it comes to bio-based materials and sustainable construction methods, as well as that the current LCA standards also don't always address all the maybe potential advantages that bio-based materials can have. Then for the cross-laminated timber, there's also still some, let's say, misconceptions related to timber in construction based both for durability, performance, safety rating, but also the harvesting of wood, which is sometimes still people feel have doubts about it. And then when it comes to hemp insulation, of course, there still is some negative stigma, which is related to hemp products. And then maybe some good examples or good practices. So for the whole sector, we really need to continue and continue this promoting to a mindset, bio-based mindset shift. That's very important, as well as establishing European-wide recognized EPDs that are valid in all our European countries and that help with, let's say, standardization of sustainability assessments within the whole of Europe, as well as providing support across the entire bio-based supply chain. So from raw material to the production of end products, as well as even the bringing back at the end of life, bringing back these products back into our cycle. Then for CLT, one of the things mentioned by one of the stakeholders was that implementing dynamic LCA assessments could also really be or are needed for CLT, for example, with adjusting for with adjustments to the land use indicator. This could really help bio-based products such as CLT, as well as that we should continue the research on bio-based adhesives to help improve the sustainability or even push sustainability of CLT even further. Then some of the market dimension results for the whole sector is that bio-based products still don't necessarily have the same amount of or as strong as a lobbying as our fossil-based products, as well as a lack of these uniform standards, which sometimes make it very difficult for bio-based products to be used and sold across the whole of Europe. And for cross-limited timber, some issues or some challenges related to the insurance and financing, for example, of public timber projects was brought up. And then for hemp insulation is that also we still don't necessarily have a super strong industrial scale hemp processing facilities available in all the countries, as there still are some restrictions on how easy it is to grow and process hemp. Then some examples and some good practices for the whole sector. A unified certification system which would really be helpful, as well as continue to use system thinking to optimize the whole entire life cycle of bio-based products, and think about how we can help and with the, let's say, marketability and actually implementation of bio-based products within the construction sector. And something that could help here, for example, is introducing carbon credits for bio-based materials, which could really help with the economical side of bio-based materials. And then for CLT, shift to from fire resistance to fire reaction could also help with the further promoting of, safe building practices related to CLT. So these were some of the main and important results that we got from the construction sector. So I will now give the floor to our next sector to be presented.
Thank you, Toby, for the nice overview. So we will go quickly in the textile sector. So let me introduce Sanabel Abdulbawab from Wageningen University. The floor is yours, Sanabel.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me and see the presentation well.
We hear you, but we are still waiting for the presentation. Yes, we now see it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this is Sanabel from Wageningen Food Bio-Based Research, and I will guide you a little bit in the textile sector, also showing the challenges and the good practices for the 3 dimensions: policy, sustainability, and market. But first, I would like to introduce quickly the 3 selected cases. So in the textile sector, we have first the lyocell case. Lyocell is a man-made cellulosic fiber, of course, and this can be extracted from either wool or any rich cellulosic material, and then this is converted into a bulb. This bulb is then spun into a fiber to make yarn and then fabric, and then to the end of the life, the 3 scenarios using recycling, landfill, or incineration. To the second case is a Prato value chain, and it is recycled carded wool. And for this its value chain, of course, we have collecting, sorting, and then mechanical recycle carding, and then make it into yarn, of course, and then into fabric, final application similarly to the end life scenarios. And the third case study is Tournoi value chain. Tournoi is basic clothing manufacturing, and in its value chain, of course, from it they collected the wool from the latex chip, and this then it is processed, washed, to be made into non-woven layer, and this is used as a filling for high quality jackets. So now moving to the policy dimensions. Of course, although we have a lot of regulations and a lot of policy, however, we see there is still like space where companies can or where there is like more claims like I am sustainable, I'm doing more recyclable, I don't have microplastic and these things. So a good practice would be like to have a more a collaboration structure, so more labeling, of course, more certifications. And also if the policy can do more to ensure that the sustainability claims are more credible. The other challenge is the high cost of the recycled and bio-based material compared to synthetic fiber. And that's what we see always for suffering for companies and consumer. And of course, if we there is more regulation to put more fees on the non-sustainable fiber, that will give it a bit of balance. And also looking to the textile industry, now the fast fashion and lead to more consumption, higher footprint in the textile industry. So a solution would be by adding more policy to give like educational and also like more for information sharing for the consumer, but also for the companies as well. So we need to raise the awarenesses. Looking specifically into the lyocell sector, we can see that lyocell is the bio-based and there is no equal level playing in the field. So synthetic fiber is always like cheaper and these things. So if we add more policies, instrument that facilitate introducing this new material to market to play equally with the fossil-based, that will partly solve the issue. Of course, there is a lack of the certification system for biomass converted to lyocell, and this can be solved partly by developing the existing or new certification. Looking into the wool sector, we see most of the wool that produced in Europe is not used. And why? That's because there is lack of the processing or the facilities of processing the wool. So we need a more policy to develop these facilities to give more development technology development, but also to ensure what we have now in Europe is still there. So to save the current laundry facilities, for example. And of course, we need a clear framework to stimulate the recycling use. And this can be done by the carbon tax, the EPR certification, and so on. Moving to the sustainability dimension for the whole sector, we see that we're still lacking transparency and traceability in the textile. And of course, we see now a lot of, for example, a lot of good practices, for example, the digital product passport, but also more certification, so that will help the textile industry to be more transparent. We have research and innovation gaps in relation to sustainability practices, so for technology, bio-based, and these things. However, there are also now good funding from the European, and this we need it also further to increase this research and to cover the innovation gaps. For lyocell specifically, we mentioned that we need a sustainable sourcing, of course, for the raw materials, so we don't need to destroy our nature. But we see also good practices from the industry. So a lot of companies now trying to use the waste of the textile and put it into the new as a feedstock for the new fibers and new garments. I would mention for recycling for the two cases. For lyocell and wool, we facing challenges in recycling for blends, but also we need a clear framework for recyclability. Of course, investment in technology and LCA can help to cover this one. And for wool specifically, the washing process requires a lot of chemical or the processing waters and chemicals. So we need more united effort from the whole Europe and the stakeholders to find where is the good place to process this wool, where would be the good place to do these actions. And finally, looking to the market dimension for the whole sector, we see that repairing is this is one of the best solution for the garment, but it's increasing the price compared to the fast fashion. So we need more tax on the ultra fast fashion to solve this issue, to lower or to make it a bit it's at the same level of the cost. Of course, the production of bio-based is higher in cost compared to the plastic. So if we add more, if we lower the VAT for sustainable business and sustainable product can be partly solved. Specifically for lyocell, we see that there is no market reward for entering the bio-based more into the market. And lowering the environmental impact. This can be solved by raising the awareness of the consumer, but also raising the awarenesses of the companies, why it is important for the stakeholders, but also for the consumer to source more sustainably. For wool specifically, we are like the industry to the process. It is coming again and again, this issue, and the collecting of wool is really lacking. So this one can be covered really in more collaboration and more networking among the stakeholders and textile wool industry to really help and save this sector. That was from the textile. If you have any questions, you are always welcome to reach. Thank you so much, and we'll give the floor to my next presenter.
Thank you, Sanabel. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Since we are a bit over time, if you can have a look and answer directly in the chat, it would be great. I take the opportunity, since I see the Slow Fashion Next is talking about the digital product passport, to remind everyone that on the 2nd of October, there will be a specific workshop exactly on the digital product passport. So if you're interested in deepening this topic, you are more than welcome. You will find on SUSTRACK website all the information for registering. And said that, I give the floor to Luana Ladu for the plastic sectors from BAM. So Luana, the floor is yours, and we see perfectly the presentation.
Can you see the presentation? Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Valentina. Good morning, everyone. As you said, my name is Luana Ladu, and I work for the Federal German Institute of Material Research and Testing. And today we provide you an insight of the case study for the plastic sector. We have 3 case studies. One of them is the PLA case study, The second one is a polypropylene from used cooked oil. And the third one is a cellulose acetate. I will present you briefly to the value chain for two of them. So first of all, the PLA, that is a bio-based biodegradable polyester derived from renewable biomass, typically from fermented plants such as starch and corn. And the building block for PLA is the lactic acid, and is derived through fermentation. After polymerization, PLA can be used for different applications, for example, in the textiles, in the packaging, agriculture, and other sectors. The polypropylene from cooked oil is a polymer compound derived from tertiary residues, in this case, used cooked oil. And the building block is naphtha, and is derived through hydrotreatment. And after polymerization, PP from used cooking oil can be used in various different applications, also in this case, for example, packaging. Now I'll briefly go to the different challenges in the 3 dimensions. And as you will see, many of these challenges have been already discussed today, especially in the chemical sector. However, so we can see that just to be quickly from the policy point of view, what is one of the challenges that we are facing, that was informed about, is the lack of a definition, of the harmonized definition of bio-based plastic and biopolymer. And one potential solution in this case could be a coherent and fact-based definition of bio-based polymer across policy framework. Also was mentioned a lot this missing level playing field among bio-based versus fossil-based plastic. For example, that there is not a carbon bonus for renewable carbon. And a potential suggestion could be, for example, to include mandatory bio-based content for specific application, for example. If we go to see the specific recommendation for the sector, for the PLA, there is an insufficient support for the use of compostable plastics for food and soil application. And in this case, it was recommended to improve in this regard the fertilizer and the microplastic legislation according to this. Regarding PP from cooking oil, the problem is linked to the insufficient collection of these oils from households. So one way could be to improve the oil waste regulation, considering also the collection of cooked oil. Regarding cellulose acetate, there is insufficient current policy framework that are governing the same bio-based materials. So we need a supportive policy framework in this regard. Regarding the sustainability dimension, what is really a problem is the lack of adequate test methods to assess the impact, especially in the biodegradation processes. And there is also the lack of transparency of sustainable information along the value chain. And so there is a need to promote the comprehensive sustainability assessment in the life cycle, and in also maybe creating more test methods. And if we in particular look at the PLA, for example, there is a problem. For example, there is a lack of certification for readily biodegradable. And also in this regard, it's very, very important to improve the comparison of this test method. For PP from cooked oils, we need to consider that we need to be careful how to dispose this, because if the used oil is not, represent also a pollutant for the environment. So we need to, if not correctly disposed, can be a problem. And this one is to be, of course, also engaged in an improved oil waste legislation. Regarding the cellulose acetate, there are energy-intensive production, and there is a need to provide heat to surrounding industrial partners and residential households, for example. Finally, looking at the market section, so we've seen many of these problems already discussed today. In this case, for example, bio-based plastic are more expensive than the fossil counterpart, and there is different market-related bottlenecks, for example, lack of investments, long time to the market, and so on. And also, so a lack of market pull measures. So there is a need to set up incentive schemes to enhance the use of biomass, sustainable biomass for material use, in this particular case, the bio-based plastic. And also there is a need to involve more stakeholders in the different phases of the value chains. And also it's very important to enhance the quality of collected bio-waste that can be used for producing, for example, plastics. Regarding the specific case of PLA, there is a problem with the scaling up of production processes, for example, also in Europe. So there is a need to increase the production capacity. And also there is a need to improve the understanding of the chemical and physical characteristics of PLA in order to really understand which one the application that should be used for PLA. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Luana, for the overview. So I see that in the chat there are many questions and comments. So before going to the next speaker, so starting presenting the monitoring tool from SUSTRACK, I just want to share this QR code. So if you're interested in participating in SUSTRACK research on the case studies that you heard about today, on sector-specific initiatives, please, you can scan this QR code and insert your data, and you will be contacted back by our experts from whom you heard today. I will also put the link in the chat. So in the meantime that people scan the QR code, and I will then put the link in the chat, I want to introduce you Marco Bianchi from Tecnalia, who will present you the monitoring framework. So today is the official day of the launching of our SUSTRACK monitoring framework. So Marco, if you want to share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valentina. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen with the presentation. Okay, you can see I will provide the presentation mode. Bye. Okay. I guess
Perfect.
you can see correctly. Okay, great. Let's go with that. Okay, so within the SUSTRACK project, we have the objective of building a bioeconomy monitoring system. Obviously, as we have seen this morning, there have been very important advances and progress in this line, notably the European Bioeconomy Monitoring System. So instead of somehow inventing the wheel, which was basically not very efficient, we try to take the most from current efforts in order to better inform policymaking on the one end, and on the other, trying to address as much as possible the limitation of the current data and indicator on the bioeconomy. And I will show you in a while. So our the monitoring system, the SUSTRACK monitoring system, has these three main objectives. First of all, facilitate access to existing resources in terms of data and indicators. So we have a repository of existing indicator, not only at the national level, but also at the regional level, so NUTS 2 or NUTS 3 region in Europe. Then we try to leverage the data in order to foster policy making and a better understanding of a sustainable transition to a bioeconomy system. And this is implemented through a quick tool to analyze the performance of countries across different management areas. And finally, we try to map all the indicators in terms of contribution to SDGs, value chain, and other specific field that might be of interest when looking for a specific indicator. The current structure of the monitoring system is divided in two main sections. Section 1 is the, let's say, most appealing one because it is a dashboard, somehow partly similar to the European Bioeconomy System for the map that are provided in the type of dynamic. But then it is complemented with this kind of performance management performance analysis that try to identify best practices across Europe and providing a rank. And then there is the third section, which we will develop based on feedbacks and suggestion from you that we, as I said, we will develop during the last year of the project. On the other end, the second section is a repository of existing indicator useful for the circular bioeconomy transition monitoring and assessment. So this indicator can be easily identified through selected filter that I will show you in a few seconds, and span different areas, including the implementation level. So if we are talking about indicator at the macro countries or EU aggregated level, or regional or city or product level, then we talk about sustainability dimension, environmental, social, economic, or circularity. Finally, contribution to SDGs and the societal objectives. So when, let's say, designing this monitoring framework, we try to stick as much as possible to what the European Commission has done in terms of bioeconomy system. So we try to align with the societal objective in terms of the indicator, and also we take the most from the data collected there. So since we are a bit behind the schedule, instead of presenting the tool with the presentation, I will directly jump to a live roadshow. So here you can see the link to the interim version of the SUSTRACK monitoring system. It should be shared within the chat, and I'm going to switch to the landing page of the monitoring system. So as I said before, this first section is very similar to the European bioeconomy system, as you can easily navigate the indicator according to the societal objective, the year, and then within each societal objective, you can select the indicator that are relevant in this case. On the right side, you can see an additional feature that will permit to, let's say, explore two indicators at once. For example, in this case, it is selected agricultural factual income for annual work and population. This might be useful to infer some relationship between indicator typology. I don't know, for example, in the case of sustainable management of resources, wait, I need to reload. Nice to have this kind of unforeseen during the live connection is not working, it seems. Do you have connection? So we have connection problem. So apparently we have some kind of connection problem in Tecnalia. No. Okay.
Yeah, I have the same problem. Marco, do you want to share the link we try to share? It is in the chat.
Yeah, it was in the chat. So if someone from SUSTRACK is able to share it.
I see that probably the problem is in general because I cannot load the tool, but
Okay,
also I see that the link cannot. Okay, now it's working.
Now it seems working. Okay. I don't know what's happening, but yeah. So I was saying before, perhaps it might be due to the visit of the website, because perhaps we are entering everyone at once, so that it doesn't handle the either visit. So as I was saying here, it might be interesting to see, for example, well, waste generation as it is mostly dependent on the population, and you can see that here in this case there is Okay, yeah, there is this linear relationship between, for example, population and waste generated. So this is a very intuitive one, but there are other kind of relationship between between different combination of indicators that might be interesting from policymaking or researcher point of view. There is the increasing the contribution of bio-based renewable resources, societal objective 3, environmental performance of the bio-based economy, societal objective number 4, and finally, bioeconomy competitiveness. So the other section, which is kind of the novelty of this data tool, relate to the country performance analysis. That is to say, you can select one country and observe how it behaves for selected here or the progress over the years. So this type of tool will allow you to compare country performance. In this case, I selected the European average, European 27 average, and for the year 2018. Based on the data availability, the tool will show you the performance from a rank from 1 to 6, and across the different, let's say, area of management. So again, we have ensuring food and nutrition security. We try to stick to the societal objective. Then sustainable management of resources, contribution of bio-based renewable resources, environmental performance, and bioeconomic competitiveness. So across all these societal objectives, you can easily compare, as I said, the performance among countries, and or on the other end, observe the progress of one country along years, always based on data availability. Regarding the second section, and then, as I said before, there is the country-specific analysis, but this will be something that we will develop during the last year based on feedback that we will receive in a while. The other section, which is the repository of indicator, we try to collect all existing knowledge on circular bioeconomy. So you can see that we have more than 360 entry for this repository, and you can check them through the filter on the left. So you can see the data, the indicator relevant, for example, for regions and city. And in this case, the query is it is 178, and then you can, for example, filter for SDGs or contribution to societal goal. In this case, let's, for example, look for indicator at the region, city level, and belonging to the societal objective 2, you will obtain 32 entries. These indicators are explained. There is a taxonomy classifying this indicator that you can see above. So indicators are classified by type of sector, whether the contribution to the SDGs, or finally you can find the source where you can find the indicator. So in this case, this can be retrieved from the file. Once that you obtain the indicator of interest, you can easily download the data, and you will obtain the description of the data along with additional complementary information, for example, on the methodology required to calculate the data, or the interpretation, the rationale of the data. Having said that, I think we can go through we can go back session, and now we would like to hear from you on, as I said before, we have still one year left for the project, and we would like to know the relevance of providing certain feature rather than others. So you can go to scan this R code, and you will have some question that would be very helpful for us.
Thank you, Marco. There is a question also for you in the chat. So in the meantime, later on, if you want to answer.
Yeah, sure.
So as Marco said, please scan the QR code using your cell phone, or if you prefer using your PC, you can go on menti.com and insert this code 58311648. So there are some questions for you to contribute to this monitoring framework. So we just give some time for you to enter. So again, you can scan or the QR code, or you can use your personal computer, menti.com, and insert this code 58311648. We will have later on in the next session another interactive session with you using the same Mentimeter. So once you open it on your cell phone or on your personal computer, don't close it even after this session will be finished. Okay, so I think that in the meantime we can go to the first question. Marco, the floor is yours.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said before, we have this third section where we were wondering whether, for example, we might include some reference value in order to better understand whether a country performance or a decision maker is doing in its territory. This reference value might refer, for example, in terms of environmental impact to threshold value in terms, for example, of material footprint or CO2 emission, but they can also refer to policy targets. So in some area, there are a specific legislative policy target, especially in waste generation or a circularity target. So the question is whether you deem relevant to provide next to the data for each indicator also some kind of reference or target value. So I can see that in general, the feeling is that this might be useful for a better understanding of the bioeconomy transition.
Okay, so we see people are still entering, but we have 26 participants. So maybe we can go also to the next one. I just want to say that in the chat you will find the website, the code, so you can continue entering and contribute even if we are going to the next question.
Okay, this is an open question. So based on your understanding and your needs, what type of reference value you would like to have in the monitoring tool? So we identified these three main categories, like policy targets, sustainability threshold, which refer perhaps to the planetary boundaries in some cases, but it might be also something that we are not aware of, and so any suggestion is very welcome in this context. Even because we reflect upon these challenges quite a lot, and it is very difficult to find for each kind of indicator some reference value that makes sense from a sustainability point of view. Okay, so I see that. Okay, efficiency related parameter. This is indeed something that we are considering. Indeed, the spider chart are not based on absolute value, but instead of a normalized indicator. So, for example, as suggested, are normalized by per capita or per GDP, depending on the nature of the indicator. Okay, I see that there is a slight prevalence of policy targets. Okay, and this somehow connects also to the second Mentimeter question that we will see in a while. So related to the policy targets, we have the intention and we are thinking to link the performance that we obtain from our tool to the best practices and suggestion for improve that specific area. So we have in SUSTRACK the work package 5, where we are elaborating on policy recommendation. So we were thinking that it would be very useful to somehow synergize with work package 5 and show the recommendation based on the performance assessment tool. Basically, the idea is that for those countries rating lower in one or the other indicator or a key management area, to show some policy recommendation on how to improve that area. So I see that even this feature is would be very welcome from the stakeholder, and I think that we will work on it to implement it in the current tool.
Good. Thank you very much, Marco, and thank you to all our stakeholders who participated very actively in this Mentimeter. If you want to participate in the development and fine-tuning, especially of this monitoring framework, we can leave you the link with a Google form to leave your contact to Marco and our experts, so they can contact you back if you want to discuss specific features to be included, some other indicators, etc. So I will leave you the link now in the chat. While in the meantime, I want to ask to Edwin Andreasson and Andrea Bassi from Knowledge to start sharing their presentation and taking the floor for the next presentation about the GEM model developed by SUSTRACK.
Thank you, Valentina. Just first, before we begin, I wanted to thank everyone for being here. My name is Edwin, and I'm one of the contributors to Work Package 4. The intention behind this presentation in general is for us to present the assumptions that we use to forecast the circular bio-based economy transition within the case studies and as well as the countries that they operate in. And then we want to ask you to essentially help us validate these assumptions. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly present what Work Package 4 is, and in general, our modeling approach. So the aim of the Work Package 4 is then to estimate the outcomes of the sustainable transition at both the industry and national level. We do so by using a macro level approach to understand the impacts by integrating an industry model into the green economy model, which mainly focuses on the national economy. And we then use these two integrations to forecast trends under various scenarios. So business as usual, which continues the trends we see today, the biotransition scenario, which is our policy-based scenario, and then the biorevolution one, which has a much higher ambition. The results of this modeling will then be organized into a systemic cost-benefit analysis that captures both the tangible and non-tangible outcomes. That being said, our modeling approach is to use systems thinking and then build the models using system dynamics. Now, the green economy model integrates social, economic, environmental drivers of change. So in this case, as you can see above here, infrastructure, population, poverty, energy economy, so on and so forth. The function for these models is then to forecast the outcomes of policy and investments across both sectors and actors while capturing it over a time dynamic, meaning that in this case, we are generating results from 2000s to 2050. And we can also then have the possibility of capturing in space with spatial tools based on these scenarios generated. The way that this works is that instead of trying to, the model doesn't tell us where to optimally invest. It rather what it does is it generates what if scenarios, meaning that what if these policies had these ambitions, or what are these costs? What if we use these policies? And the aim of this is then to help inform decision makers to make more informed decisions, to then overall have better outcomes in the end. We don't tell people where to invest, but we generate essentially what if scenarios. This has already been applied to more than 50 countries. So the way this integration works through the green economy model and the industry model is that the green economy model provides population, power emission, and emission factors into the industrial model, which then, using population, drives demand, generates a certain production. Based on that production, that generates a certain amount of waste, either through the end of a lifetime or through the waste that is generated through the process itself, which is then either recycled, reused, or burnt or landfilled. The industry model then provides the energy demand through the processes back into GEM. And more importantly, what it also does is it generates a certain amount of value addition, which is then added to the national GDP so that we can see the interactions between the national model, GEM, and the industry model itself. So each industry model is set up with various scenarios. Like I said before, it covers the business as usual, the biotransition scenario, and then again, the more ambitious scenario, the biorevolution one. The policies that we mainly text and test are from literature, so looking at the policy documents, but they're also based on the specific industry design workshops that were held during the summer with some of the challenges that were presented earlier. The way that the policies work is that they're sectorially targeted, meaning that they're divided into 4 different sectors, where one covers demand, efficiency of the industry, switching towards more bio-based materials, and also then towards waste. Demand, the way that it works is that it tries to lower essentially new production by either for example, renovating more buildings, generally decreasing the consumption, or trying to make sure, for example, in textiles, where the essential lifetime would last longer. Efficiency policies are essentially just to make the industries more efficient with the material consumption as well as energy consumption. Switching is the part where, based on the production, it's the amount of materials that are being put into or used are from bio-related materials. And recycling, I feel, is self-explanatory, where we then cover collection rate, recycling rates, as well as what rates are being reused and resold. Getting into the assumptions themselves, we'll go by industry. So we'll start construction, plastics, then go into textile and lastly chemicals. What we can see here is that these are the policy themselves. This is the year and that they're being the year for the ambition, and the BT is the biotransition, while BR is biorevolution. So regarding initially construction, we can see that in biorevolution scenario, by 2050, 6% of buildings are being renovated a year compared to the 4% in biotransition. In efficiency, this is calculated cumulatively, meaning that by 2050, the biorevolution scenario will be more efficient compared to the biotransition scenario, because in 2030, we can see that the 2% per year compared to the 1.5% per year in the biotransition. Moving on to the switching of materials, we can see that the share of material consumption replaced by wood, and in this case, it could be any of the materials mentioned in the case study earlier. We can see that in the biorevolution scenario, 40% of the material consumption is bio-based compared to 30% in the biotransition. Waste collection, by 2030, it's higher in biorevolution. Recycling rate in this case is 95% in biorevolution, which then leaves us with a material resold and reused being 2.5%, and the remaining being landfilled. The reason that the resold and reused that is lower in the biorevolution scenario is that the model first prioritizes recycling, then reuse, and lastly prioritizes other waste flows. Plastics, moving on to plastics, again, we can see here that there are 2 policies that target demand, and this specifically is decreasing consumption, meaning that we want to make sure that each person consumes less plastic over the time, and in this case, it is 20% per year in the biorevolution scenario, 15% per year in the biotransition. The second policy, or the decrease in plastic demand, is specifically representing whether certain plastics may be banned, as it's happening in, I believe, Germany and parts of California at the moment, which is not present in the biotransition scenario, but in the biorevolution scenario, we see that 15% in 2050 of demand is then reduced. Regarding efficiencies, it's 2% per year in the biorevolution scenario, followed by 1% per year again, just to mention that this is also cumulatively, so it'll stack over time. In this case, we can see it that regarding switching, that by 2050, both in the biotransition and biorevolution scenario, 26% of materials are replaced by bio-waste. The difference is that in the biorevolution scenario, this occurs 5 years earlier. Regarding recycling, again, we can see that in the biorevolution scenario, this is higher with 95% compared to 80%, and around 5% being reused and resold in biorevolution. It's important to note that because there's 95% being recycled and 4.8% being resold and reused, that leaves 0.2% to either be burnt or landfilled. Moving on to textiles, the way that the demand policies work in this case is that they extend the lifetime of the product, meaning that people can use these products for much longer so that there's less need to produce more textiles. So in this case, in the biorevolution scenario, this is 5 years compared to 4.5 years for the biotransition. Efficiencies, again, we see that in biorevolution, it's 0.8% per year compared to 0.5% per year cumulatively. share material consumption, in this case, is 30% of textiles are being replaced by bio-based based materials compared to 20% in the biotransition scenario. Waste collection follows the same general trend we've seen before, with collection, recycling, and both material resold reuse rate being much higher. In this case, we can see that there is no waste going into landfills or being burned because the recycling rate is 70% with the resold rate being 30%. Regarding chemicals, in this case, there is no policy that targets demands, so we're going to jump straight into the efficiencies. And in this case, they follow the same values and they both target energy efficiencies as well as material efficiencies. So what we can see here is that in 2030, for the bio-revolution, it's 1.5% per year compared to the biotransition where it's 1%. And this then follows for both energy and material efficiencies. Regarding replacing the materials that are being consumed to produce chemicals, we can see that 30% of it by 2050 is from bio-based materials, and while it's 20% in the biotransition. Regarding waste collection, it's 5% higher. Recycling rate is 15% higher in the bio-revolution scenario, with an overall then resold and reuse rate being 25%, because again, 75 plus 25 is 100%, so there's nothing going into landfills or waste. That was the very brief overview of some of the assumptions, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to present some of the preliminary high-level findings itself. This PowerPoint will be changed that includes individual results per sector, but there also is a report that's being prepared that will be shared soon. So sort of high-level results is that initially we find that even though we have policies that target demand, meaning that we're reducing overall consumptions, eventually the value addition per industry gets overtaken in compared to the BAU, because the per unit value addition in these bio-based scenarios is higher than in the conventional one, meaning that even though we are reducing consumption, the value addition per bystand eventually offsets some of those initial losses. We also see that there's an increased demand for biomass because we're using more bio-based materials, which could have some unintended consequences of the agricultural sectors. So there is always going to be some trade-offs and implications, so there always needs to be a careful consideration on what the unintended consequences could be of a transition. And in this case, it might be good to consider some complementary policies that facilitate transitions. That being said, I'm now going to sort of turn the camera towards you and ask if you could please just fill out the last part of the Menti, where we ask you if you could just, do you find the targets underlying each scenario any further screenings to be realistic? In the hopes that if you either say yes, or if you say no, and then we can contact you to discuss it more, or if you want to have more time to think, there's also a third option for that. With that, I think I turn it back to Valentina. Thank you.
Thanks, Edwin. So again, if you already have the Menti open, you just have to go to your cell phone or PC. Otherwise, you can either scan the QR code or again go on menti.com and insert the code that is the same as before, 58311648. So we will collect responses. So I see that there is a bit of, there are two people who are happy to contribute. So please, if you can just write down the email of Edwin and Andrea from Knowledge, you will have, you can exchange with them to contribute to fine-tuning those percentages and those targets. I see that some people agree with this analysis, while others would prefer to exchange. I also invite people who prefer to exchange with our experts and give their opinion. So again, I will share in the chat the emails, Edwin and Andrea emails. So yeah, I see Edwin already shared the emails now in the chat. So please feel free to reach out and we will be more than happy to exchange with you about this. Okay, so I think we can, in the meantime, move on to the next speaker, since we are a bit over the schedule. So I think we will finish 10 minutes ahead of the planned schedule. But I want to give the floor to Harry Schindler from DBFZ to give you an overview of SUSTRACK contributions to EU policy. And after Harry, we will have Gulsa giving the policy recommendation towards the revision of the bioeconomy strategy. So please stay until the very end if you're interested in. But for the moment, I leave the floor to Harry. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Valentina. Can you see my screen, my slides?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to give you a bit of an outlook of what we are going to do next in the work package 5, which is about finding policy priorities. And we've already heard a lot of policy ideas, policy suggestions you already commented on in the chat. There are many interesting options, but there are also a lot of options, and maybe not all of the options will work perfectly or without trade-offs. So we still have to do some more work here. So basically, we are talking about the transition to the circular bio-based economy, about a great transition of large parts of the entire economy. So it's a very complex policy challenge. It covers very many economic sectors and many policy areas. For example, agriculture, forestry, and the sectors you heard about today, construction, chemicals, textiles. In terms of policy sectors, it's about climate policy, environmental policy, agriculture. It's also about trade policy, for example, if we want to lower our dependency on critical raw materials from China or other places in the world. It's about food security, energy, and so on. So it's really a tough and complex challenge. And the transition also is still, even though we have many policy documents, still kind of fuzzy or vague. For example, it's not really clear where we should put more emphasis. Is it on the production of biomass in the primary sectors, forestry and agriculture, or should we, as in SUSTRACK, look more on the secondary sectors like construction and so on? And also, we know that the transition is going to or shall deliver on sustainability, but also growth. But as we already heard in the morning, there might be trade-offs also in the modeling results we just saw. There might be trade-offs, for example, between growth and sustainability. And the new European Commission is believed to put more emphasis, for example, on growth and competitiveness, and maybe less on climate change mitigation as the last commission. Well, we'll have to see, but these kind of priorities might also change a bit the nature and the outcome of this transition. So this is not really clear. It's still also in transition. And also we are all talking a lot about recycling and using less of like critical raw materials, for example, and of course fossil resources. But it's still a bit open as to how much recycling do we actually get in this circular bio-based economy. We know we cannot get like 100% recycling. That's technically not possible, but it might also not be economically reasonable to approach such a high level of recycling. So how far are we going with this type of technology or transition? Okay, because this is so fussy, we created a working definition for this work package and the SUSTRACK project, which tries to pin down what exactly we mean with the circular bio-based economy and what the policies that we recommend in the end will actually deliver to. And it's a bit of complex, but I guide you through it just 1 minute. In the outer range, you see the SDGs. Obviously, this is the final goals, but not all SDGs are equally relevant for the transition. And we see here from the bioeconomy strategy in this blue circle, 5 key goals: climate protection, competitiveness, and jobs, and so on. And at the next level, dark green, we see that from definitions in the literature, we have key principles for the transition that make it more specific and more easy to put policy instruments to accelerate the transition. And this is emissions reduction, efficient resource use, and decoupling growth from resource use. So when we're thinking about reaching these goals, we have to always take in mind these criteria to minimize trade-offs and unwanted side effects. What we also find in the literature is something what we call key means, and we are even moving closer to actual policies here. And you know, all this means like cascading use of biomass, recycling, also rethinking reduce, but also using biomass, using wastes, using residues. So we are translating these abstract goals and abstract principles to more precise means in order to, in the end, find policies that consistently deliver to these goals and minimize trade-offs. Okay, we have seen, as I said, there are many policy ideas, and here's also a chart of policies that are related, for example, to circular economy. So that's not even a full picture. If you take bioeconomy policies in here, the picture will be much more difficult still, but this is the step that we are collecting options. What options are on the table to actually achieve the transition? And the next we will look in work package 5 is, do we find any patterns? For example, does policies at the EU or in certain countries make use more of a certain type of instrument because they find it more effective? And we will also see, when comparing these policies to our definition and the elements that are part of the circular bio-based economy, whether there are still gaps where we still have to have other policies. But of course, it's not the point to only add even more policies, because we already have a lot of policies. So a key question in this work package will be, what are actually priorities? What is the most important thing to accelerate the transition? And that's a difficult question, because we cannot just give you like these 50 or 60 policy interventions here, policy options, and you rank them, because this is very tricky. And also not all of these policy options are, it's not always either or. Many are complementary and reinforcing each other. You might need many policy instruments. So the question is, how do we find priorities? And we will going to focus on policy instruments that are actually alternatives, where you would say, I would use either this or that one. And this is how we're going to find a priority. I give you an example. We want to have more recycling. And one option is what is called a direct regulation recycling quota. We already have recycling quotas, for example, in the packaging sector. But there's also an alternative. You could use taxes and make product routes more expensive. They do not recycle. It's not an actual quota, but you make the other, the non-recycling activities economically less attractive. And the interesting thing is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each approach? And yeah, what we will discuss, what the stakeholders would prefer for their sectors, and then try to customize these policy options according to the sector. So what we try to come up with in the end is priorities for each of the key sectors we discussed today, also options to disclose policy gaps if we find some, and in the end to have a consistent policy agenda for the transition with the most important policy steps. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. So I see that some people are leaving. I also remind that you can find the recording for the last policy session if you're interested in. So Gulsa, the floor is yours. You can share the slides, and of course we will send also the slides, but maybe you're interested in listening to Gulsa, so you will find the recording on our YouTube channel.
I'm on it. So let me see the policy slides. Okay, and I will be as quick as possible, since we have been hearing a lot of policy actions happening in the course of our project. I hope you are seeing it in the presentation mode now. Okay. So I also want to just start with saying that now we see a clear picture of how complex the problem we are dealing with is, and we are still working on the findings and analyzing them comprehensively in the scope of our project. And we see that there can be policy recommendations at different levels. such as more on the high-level policies aligned with sustainable development goals, for example, or there can be very specific instruments, as Harry mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, to overcome some specific identified challenges. Here in this presentation, we want to map the high-level recommendations which we collected through the literature reviews and the stakeholder engagement activities in the previous rounds of design conferences. And we wanted to link them to the corresponding sustainable development goals to highlight the hotspots that can be useful in the revision of the strategy. And I also want to underline, to stress that we are still in the early phase of driving concrete policy conclusions. Hence, these are our preliminary recommendations, and they might still be updated later on in the course of our project. So also in this slide, we see the recommendations in the chemical sector at higher level. The ones highlighted as bold are sector level recommendations. So I would like to just focus on these ones for the sake of time. So as we see, these first three ones are ensure policy coherence and create an enabling environment to safeguard investments, penalize the use of virgin fossil inputs, and identify the levers that will have the most positive effects, such as feedstocks and energy use. So what we try here is somehow mapping how these recommendations feed sustainable development goals in order to say, okay, maybe these can be the starting points, not only for one sector, but can be also across different sectors. And also for the recommendations, we see that there is a pattern that is going under the 12th responsible consumption and production sustainable development goal. So this somehow also underlines the importance of sustainable development goals in the scope of policy making under our project activities. So you will see the similar scheme for all different sectors, which will highlight also the importance of SDGs, and you will see the pattern. And for the construction sector, we put our emphasis on the policy recommendations, again, sector-wise, to facilitate knowledge exchange and mutual learning with projects such as the one that we are contributing to, and to develop a common certification system for evaluating circular economy practices within the construction industry. But somehow this is not a sector-specific recommendation, as one of the questions were raised also in the chat. So this is also a common problem across different sectors. So you see again the 12th responsible consumption and production sustainable development goal, along with industry, innovation and infrastructure, which is the 9th sustainable development goal. And for the plastics sector, instead, we see two sector-wide recommendations. Since the slides will be available later on, so I will just leave the other ones to you if you are interested to go deeper. So the recommendations are providing a coherent and fact-based definition of bio-based polymers across all policy frameworks, and implementing financial support such as incentives for scaling up biopolymers production and improve policy coherence. So again, here we see that the main focus is to contribute to the revision in terms of the 12th Sustainable Development Goal, but also this sector contributes to industry, innovation and infrastructure and sustainable cities and communities in terms of the policy-related activities. And finally, the textile sector, which we have also a very complicated interconnected map of sustainable development goals. We have 3 recommendations at the sector level: setting up collaboration structures and policies that ensure the sustainability claims in the EU that are credible. Again, that goes back to certification schemes and labels, and providing clear certifications for future needs. Maybe we can even think about them together, combined, and promoting and funding research into the end-of-life solutions beyond recycling. So again, we see the same pattern: feeding responsible consumption and production, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and climate action in this case, of course. The importance of all these policy-related activities. So we hope that these insights could be useful in order to translate these findings in the revision of the bioeconomy strategy. So I think in very short terms, this is the overview that I can provide. And if you have any other suggestions, comments, and contributions, we will be happy to hear from you, as we mentioned before. So I guess with this, we are still almost 60 people. Maybe I can simply thank you very much for your time, for your contributions. And we really enjoy these stakeholder engagement activities and seeing that you are also contributing to all the discussions in chat, in Mentimeters, and later on we keep in touch with all the ones that are interested. And yes, we will share the slides with you after the conference. So we will also share the video recordings. And if we miss something or if you see a room for improvement, we will be more than happy to hear from you again. So I guess I'll leave it back to Valentina, and that's all from my side. Thanks again.
Thanks, Gulsa. I would say that you already, greet our stakeholders. So thanks also from our side for your participation. I left in the chat again the links to the Google Forms if you want to participate, the emails of our experts. So please really feel free to reach out for improving our research with your opinions. And thanks again. Have a great day, everyone, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.